How you doing?
Good, thanks. How you doing, Randy?
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. This is episode number 104 of Tech Sales Insights. As always, brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, thank you. For those that are not, you can go to salescommunity.com and you can do actually /winter free or look at the website and you can see a free link there. And also have one of our sales community sponsors, Decision Link, as a sponsor today. They are a very cool company in the value selling space. They're a customer value management platform, and they've got a really cool tagline, drive value further. The longer description is they are a enablement platform that empowers companies to define, quantify, and validate business outcome at scale. From day one, draw a straight line from your value proposition to revenue for your customers. So we have Bennett Collen, CEO of Endstate. Our topic is NFTs in the state of crypto. So certainly a great time for it. And as we were preparing, I said, okay, here's the questions. I don't want the answers because I want to be surprised because I really don't get it. But I'm sure after this, I and our listeners will get it. And for those watching along, this is on LinkedIn Live. And you can see us or you can hear us. We cannot see you, but certainly feel free to post any questions or any comments along the way. And we got Tucker behind the scenes, who always does a great job getting those pulled up for us. So Bennett lives in the Boston area, West Roxbury. Has a young family, an eight-month-old who, unfortunately, Kate just came home sick from daycare. So that's certainly a bummer these days. And he's also coached grade school baseball and basketball. And we are both investors in SSC, which is kind of a VC-centric venture fund called, what is it, Soaring Startup Circle, right?
Right.
There you go. Yeah, but certainly a great group there too. And needless to say, Bennett's very active in the blockchain space and somehow finds time to be a BC professor teaching a course called Business Apps of Blockchain and Cryptocurrency, of which it sounds like the company's getting too much of your time in the family. So you're done after this semester, right?
Yeah, so I usually only teach the fall semester and give
Okay,
myself a breather in the spring.
gotcha. And then are you going to go do it next fall?
Probably, yeah.
There you go. All right. So let's jump in here. So I always like to have people talk about their first job. And for you, it was actually in sales at a Red Sox team store, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I worked in the souvenir shop on Yawkey Way across from Fenway, just sort of running merchandise from the back to the front. You're checking people out at the cash register is sort of a typical retail job. But growing up as a lifelong Red Sox fan, especially one who grew up in New York, it was really
Oh,
cool to go to Fenway for work and, get to sneak into the games on breaks and just be around the stadium on a regular basis.
wow. Yeah, I grew up a diehard Yankees fan. I grew up in kind of New Haven, then Branford, Connecticut, which was kind of
Mm.
the line for Yankees,
Yep.
Red Sox. And then with EMC, I kind of bounced around the world, landed back in Boston, and then somehow became a Red Sox fan. So anyway, very cool. And then maybe just kind of quickly go through your career after your sales stint at the Red Sox store.
Yeah. So after that, I started working with my dad at his law firm. He's an IP attorney, and started thinking about business development and ways we can get new clients into the practice. One of the ideas was a website that categorized names, right? So things that people give names to, which are brands and can turn into trademarks. One of the subcategories on the site was business names, and that became really popular as a way for people to make a claim to trademarks that they were using without actually registering them. So we spun that out into its own business called Cognate. So I was the co-founder and CEO of that business starting in 2014, built that up into sort of a decent SaaS business. But then in 2015, we stumbled across this new thing called the Ethereum blockchain. So my CTO and I were at this talk at MIT listening to this new database structure called the blockchain that can make these immutable timestamped records. we kind of looked at each other and said, this is the perfect technology for helping people protect their trademark rights, whether or not they're registered. It's almost stronger than a registration. Of course, the lawyers wouldn't let us say this is stronger than an actual trademark registration, but we thought the tech was really cool, incorporated it into Cognate. Long story short, we started doing some strategic partnerships with domain name registrars, eventually got connected to GoDaddy. GoDaddy bought Cognate in 2018. So I spent a few years working at GoDaddy before leaving to co-found Endstate in 2021.
Wow, very, very cool. So 2015 is when you first got into all this.
Yeah, so the very end of 2015 was when the first time we came across the term blockchain, did a little bit more research, started building out some of the infrastructure across 2016. And then the timing ended up being really good as it coincided with the first really major bull market in the crypto space where it entered mainstream consciousness.
Wow. All right. So as we said before, I don't really get it. So I definitely look forward to being enlightened. So maybe kind of from a high level, set the stage, kind of from a basic perspective, describing crypto and describing blockchain.
Sure. So crypto and blockchain are both umbrella terms, and people use them sometimes interchangeably to refer to the industry that uses blockchains for various purposes. So a blockchain is just a form of a database that is typically a distributed ledger that has multiple participants who are all contributing to the consensus, or really how new entries get added to the ledger, right? And so there's specific rules around the data that goes into the ledger. There's cryptographic security to make sure that people aren't cheating the system. And the whole blockchain ecosystem was developed to secure cryptocurrency, namely the first cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin, right? So blockchain is an enabling technology that secures cryptocurrencies. And the first major use case for blockchains were these cryptocurrencies. I'm sure a lot of people followed the first ICO wave where all of these new tokens were coming into the market. People were saying you have to invest in crypto and buy, all these new tokens. It's the future, which, kind of turned out to be true and kind of turned out to not be true. But crypto, when people use it as a shorthand for cryptocurrency, is a subset of blockchain, right? So blockchain is the enabling technology that allows cryptocurrencies to function in this permissionless and distributed way.
Got you. And then the relationship. So Bitcoin is kind of type of cryptocurrency.
That's right. There's the first cryptocurrency.
And are there other cryptocurrencies?
Yes, there's now thousands and thousands of cryptocurrencies.
Okay. And how do people mint or make? You hear people saying, hey, they've got their own Bitcoins and then they've got this almost mini data center in their house in order to make them. And it seems like unlimited, that if you or I wanted to go mint or make our own Bitcoin, I just don't understand how that works.
Each cryptocurrency has its own method for issuing new cryptocurrencies, how you acquire it. But let's just talk about Bitcoin to simplify things.
Yeah.
So new Bitcoin is only created in one way, and it's by quote unquote mining Bitcoin. Yeah. But that's become a really professionalized process where people have these enormous data centers. They have access to cheap electricity. The most common way that people acquire Bitcoin now is to buy it on an exchange. So you go to something like Coinbase, you say, hey, I want to buy Bitcoin. Here's how much I want to buy. You buy it, they put it in a wallet for you. In terms of issuing of new Bitcoin, it's not unlimited. So there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin ever minted. So it's a finite number. And it was part of the founding ethos behind the Bitcoin ecosystem is we want sound money, right? And it was sort of made in reaction to some of the quantitative easing policies that were put in place after the 2008 financial crisis from the viewpoint of the creator or creators of Bitcoin, because they're still unknown who exactly it was. From their point of view, the banks got everyone into a lot of trouble, and then the banks got bailed out, and, the government was debasing the US dollar. And there was, sort of a whole ideological component that went into it. But one of the big pieces of it is there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and it's deflationary. There's no Fed that can say, okay, we're going to, Federal Reserve that can print more Bitcoin.
Gotcha. And from, again, naive perspective, it's kind of like, okay, I have this piece of paper. I'm going to call it a $100 bill. All of a sudden it's worth $100. So whoever had made or minted those Bitcoins early on, there was some cost, but then you have this Yeah, pricing that then I know you kind of trades in a big range, but then it's kind of the market then that sets the pricing, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it is very volatile, right? It's not great for day-to-day transactions because if you use it to buy a cup of coffee, you could spend $4 on your cup of coffee today, and tomorrow you could have spent $400 on your cup of coffee, or you could have spent 4 cents on it, right? I mean, swings aren't that dramatic anymore, but it is very volatile, and it's become more of a store of value and an uncorrelated asset theoretically to the rest of the financial market. So people see it as more of a hedge and digital gold than a day-to-day transaction medium.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting for sure. So anyway, so let's jump into your company. So Endstate, and congratulations, you just did a $5.5 million seed round in June. Good timing on that, huh?
Thank you. Yeah, timing was very good.
Wow, awesome. And so if we talk about, I guess, kind of what you sell, there's three categories of physical sneakers, which I get, then NFTs, which I kind of don't get, and then these exclusive experiences that I don't get. So let's go kind of one by one. So physical sneakers. Saw you did some cool sneakers for the red bandana game. You have your Ortiz thing. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah, we actually think of them really all as one, right? So we don't think of it
Yeah.
as three separate products. We like to think the digital component is the digital counterpart to the physical component and vice versa, right? Internally, we call it entangled. We like to think of it as, these two things can't really be unentangled. They're one entity. So starting from the easiest part, the part that's most familiar to everyone, we make physical sneakers. So we work with collaborators, think athletes, artists, musicians, other brands who have followings who want to connect with their followers in a more unique and engaging way. So we happen to do that through sneakers. My co-founder is a woman named Stephanie Howard. She's a legendary sneaker designer. She was design director at New Balance. She was design director at Nike. Some of her designs that she did back in the 90s have been re-released in recent years because they were so popular. So she has this really amazing following and great background in the space. So she, her collaborating with some of these athletes and artists is a big draw for them, just given her background in the space. So what we do is go to someone and say, hey, we were big fans of yours. We think your audience would love a signature sneaker. Stephanie designs an actual physical sneaker. We get it manufactured, and then we have a corresponding NFT that relates one-to-one to each pair of sneakers, right? So you can think of it as a digital certificate of authenticity where you're saying this physical pair of sneakers is legitimate, and here is the digital certificate of authenticity as presented in the form of an NFT. Once we have those two things together, it then allows us to provide the third leg of the stool, which is these experiences exclusively for the fans of the collaborators who bought the sneaker, right? So we can have these token gated experiences where people are able to engage with the collaborator because they can prove that they bought the sneaker and they own the NFT, showing that they're, a big fan of the collaborator. So to take it from the abstract to a specific example, we recently did a sneaker with Devontae Smith, who's a wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, Heisman Trophy winner, incredibly talented, also happens to be a really fashionable guy. So we approached him to do a sneaker together. He was really excited about it. He and Stephanie went back and forth on a sneaker design, landed on a design, started the production of the physical sneakers. Then we sold the NFT to to Devontae's fans. It sold out. And then we were able to layer in these experiences for his fans. The first one we did was almost like a parlay bet on an individual game where, or a prop bet, I should say, where if Devontae had a play of 41 yards or longer, because that was how long his walk-off touchdown was in the 2019 national championship at Alabama. So we said, if Devontae has a play of 41 yards or longer, everyone who bought the NFT gets a cheesesteak. Right. So we just quote unquote, airdropped a gift certificate to buy a cheesesteak to everyone who bought this NFT before the physical sneakers had even shipped. So it's this really cool engagement mechanism of Devontae rewarding his most loyal and closest fans who bought into the sneaker drop in a new and different way, mediated through the NFT. And then we have a couple of other similar things to that with his on-field performance, but then there's also in real life events. So, for instance, in January, we're doing an event at a sneaker boutique in Philly. Devontae is going to be there, and your ticket to the event is the sneaker. So we've got a chip inside the sneaker. You scan the sneaker, you get to walk inside the door and come in and meet Devontae because you bought his sneaker, right? So we really like this concept of connecting the collaborator to their fans through the NFT, through a super culturally relevant and interesting product being sneakers, through an NFT as the sort of certificate of authenticity, which creates these unique experiences that you don't get through a traditional product offering.
Gotcha. Fascinating. So amazing. So those watching, if you want to ask any questions or comment, please feel free as we go through this. So the NFT, what do you do? So it's like a digital replica of the sneaker, right?
Sometimes the NFTs typically contain an image of the sneaker. Sometimes there's additional artwork for it. So for Devontae's, it's actually a statue of him holding the sneaker, right? So we kind of made a statue of Devontae in the spirit of the Statue of Liberty, right? So it's like this oxidized copper, and like the sneaker is sort of floating above his hand in the metaverse, right? But yeah, typically there will be a depiction of the sneaker in the NFT.
Yeah. So what do you do with it? So what do you look at on your computer? I mean, it's not like artwork you can put on your wall. So like, what do you do with it?
First and foremost, you get into the events, right? So we deliver utility in the NFT, like that's your ticket to get into the event. And then secondarily, you can authenticate that you own a legitimate pair of the sneakers, right? So think about a Rolex. If you're selling a Rolex on a secondary market, it's a lot more valuable to have the original certificate of authenticity than without it. We think of NFTs the same way. We happen to embed a chip inside the tongue of the sneaker that can always be scanned to, sort of layer back to this digital certificate of authenticity. But then in terms of like the digital artwork itself, there are digital galleries where you can display all the NFTs that you own. I think the use cases for that eventually will get more interesting. Right now, it's more of a novelty. But from an Endstate perspective, we think of it as the utility that it gets you in the real world as opposed to what you do with the digital artwork itself.
Gotcha. So I would, and we may disagree, which is fine, but I would think having a digital, kind of artwork on the wall that has value and you can kind of touch it and feel it and, and see it. So like I've not seen or heard of people saying, hey, I've got my, an NFT on the wall being kind of whatever it is. So some of that does happen, but I guess not much, correct?
Yeah. I think actually Samsung might have done like a smart TV that can like connect to your NFT gallery and is like a screensaver. It will cycle through your NFT. So there's definitely some work being done there.
Wow. Amazing. And then from a price point, it's pretty much they're all custom runs on the sneakers in effect.
Yeah, it depends on who the collaborator is and what the quantity is, but it's definitely a premium product.
Interesting. So I wouldn't necessarily go to the store like you'd have a run of the red bandana shoes as an example, where those I think you said you sold 100 of them, right? So that's where do you pre-make them, or you say here's the sneaker and then you're going to kind of build it based on the orders?
It depends on the collaborator. We like to do the latter, obviously, right? Because then we're not taking on inventory risk.
Right.
But some, based on timing or the nature of the partnership, we do have to take an inventory position and get them manufactured ahead of time.
Gotcha. Fascinating. And then, so if I want to go, if I go to your site, there's not necessarily inventory of shoes to go do. So it's say with the Devontae Smith one might be a better example. So like how many of those are kind of, I don't know if you can say either you've sold or for sale, or kind of what the quantity of sales is going to be over whatever period of time?
Yeah. So there were 175 of those sold out. We also have another 50 pairs that were going to be exclusively available at a retail partner. So I mentioned we're doing an event with Devontae at a sneaker boutique. So the sneaker boutique is going to have 50 pairs available around that event. And then Devontae has some pairs that he's going to give to, friends and family, but that's it. That's the whole collection is 250, very limited. 175 are made available for the public. So the only way to get them is either now at this retail event early next year, or through secondary sales.
Gotcha. So it's almost like in the art world, maybe like a seriograph, which is a replica of a painting. and he might have not that there's not just one original, but you have a limited to be quantity of that one, kind of one of 250, 253, 250. It's that limited run, and then once those are all sold out, then theoretically the secondary market from a financial perspective kind of bids things up.
That's right.
Gotcha. And then again, don't know if you're allowed to get into details, but then certainly understand how you get revenue. But then in order to kind of, what's your vision kind of 5 years from now in terms of you're really scaling it up? Is it that you're an independent, or Nike or New Balance picks you up? Because there's obviously lots of use cases for those bigger companies.
Yeah. So to answer the first one, revenue happens through the sneaker sales. So we take we take a different approach to the traditional companies where we are involving the collaborator directly in the economics of the sale, instead of just saying, hey, we'll pay you an endorsement fee up front, and then we make all the money on the back end. We sort of sign them up as partners because we want them to have real skin in the game and interest in the collection doing well. But it's pretty simple in that our revenue comes from the sneaker sales. A lot of the collections that we've done so far have been these very exclusive limited drops. We have a couple of collaborators on the calendar for 2023 that are much larger. And then in terms of what the future of the company is, we have a huge roadmap ahead of us with a lot of exciting stuff that I don't know what that would look like inside of another company. And we have no plan to sort of try and get acquired anytime soon. I think that what we're doing is really interesting and different. And I love being an agile team that can really aggressively go after new opportunities, do things that don't scale because of what stage we're at, and how quickly we can run experiments. So I really like the spot we're in right now.
Wow. And then with the, again, probably unlimited use cases, but given that you're at BC in the college environment, so if the women's lacrosse team wanted to do a sneaker deal with you, tie in the whole NFTs, tie in a NIL sponsor, right? So like Red Bandana example, Empower Retirement is the kind of main sponsor of the Red Bandana game. Maybe it's a better use case. So then if they tied in some sneaker deal that was an NIL tied in with the football team, that could easily cascade as well, correct?
Yeah, we actually are doing a BC NIL cohort drop. So it's not with a particular team, but we've got a couple of athletes we're talking to. We'll be announcing them shortly within like the next 30 days or so. So we're excited about that. But I do think there is an opportunity to do more involved things, like with official partners, like you mentioned, Empower and the Red Bandana. That one makes a ton of sense because we're all aligned in wanting to do as much good as possible for the Wells Crowther Trust, and help Allison continue to spread Wells' story.
Oh, amazing! So I'm just thinking, my son Tommy, it's at Alabama, right? So if the baseball team wanted to pay, kind of get their, whatever sneakers and NFTs and all that, then there could be an additional resale, but then you could take that and go to, local merchants, for lack of better words, that may want to be trying to sell to, whether it's, maybe not as much car dealers, but maybe bars, restaurant, pizza places, kind of things like that, right? They get their logo on a sneaker, and it's an NFT, and that could be a whole cool thing that then that merchant who is really funding the NIL deal then would pay for, right?
Yeah, it gets tricky with the teams if they have existing brand partners and sponsors, but
there'll be more individuals.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then I don't know what you're allowed to say for pricing, but say if, I'm 59, so say I do 60th birthday party and I've got 100 friends and I want to do a sneaker run for that, kind of what's a ballpark kind of, price per sneaker?
It's really hard to say because it depends so much on the design and the materials are used. Is a pretty wide range.
Gotcha. Is there a low to high, or you don't want? And I appreciate if you don't want to say, but
it's not that I don't want to say. It's just so variable that it I could give you a range, but it probably wouldn't be very useful.
Gotcha. All right, just crazy, fascinating. And then the authenticity. It's kind of like when you get if you have a signed football, right? You have those little, certificate labels. So I guess that's, somewhat similar, but then there's certainly, lots of, bigger, better use cases. So then now maybe talk about your sales model, which is unique from a lot of the kind of other enterprise, tech sales folks that we have on. So kind of how do you sell?
We sell directly to the customers, and our main channel is through the social accounts of our collaborators. So our thesis is that our collaborators have the best relationship with their fans. They have a direct line of sight into their fans. They have direct lines of communication with their fans. Their fans are already going to their social profiles to get updates on them and see what they're up to. So we think that's the most effective channel. So most of the marketing happens through the collaborators. And then we just have a website or a subdomain on our website where people come to actually buy the sneakers. We are actually talking to a couple of partners that may want to sell on their own websites. We're pretty flexible on that, depending on who the partner is and what existing e-commerce solutions they have. But typically, market through the collaborator, sell on the Endstate site.
Wow, fascinating. So for Devontae Smith, then it would be through his Twitter or wherever people go to follow him.
Yep.
And albeit you're sold out there, but then there might be some. I guess there's a whole nother market which could be a clearinghouse for the secondary sales of your Endstate sneakers and NFTs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big component of this. And, we're going to see more and more physical products be attached to NFTs. And I think that, the eBays of the world and some of these secondary marketplaces is going to become standard. Okay, if I want to sell any good that is of any significant value on the secondary market, it better have a corresponding digital certificate of authenticity. Whether or not that's actually an NFT that exists on a blockchain somewhere may or may not be the case, but I think that that's what people are going to start to demand for secondary sales of products in the near future.
Wow. And then do you envision, I guess, first question, how did you ever pick sneakers for this?
I'm a lifelong sneakerhead, so I just picked what I thought was the coolest and most interesting product category that was out there. And from a business model perspective, not everyone can make a sneaker, right? Like Stephanie has 25 years of experience doing this. She's got 25 years of connections in manufacturing. We have a design process and manufacturing process that's 1/3 of the typical time, right? So we can get a new sneaker out in like 6 months, whereas it takes the traditional companies about 18 months to bring a new silhouette to market. So the fact that we can do that and it's not a commodity, like, I love hoodies and, t-shirts like everyone else does, but so many people can create hoodies and t-shirts. We're inundated with, free t-shirts and hoodie opportunities. It's a really differentiated offering for the collaborators. And it's in a culturally relevant and coveted product category like sneakers. People go crazy over sneakers. I'm one of those people, so I know. And to be able to offer that to some of our collaborators is really interesting.
Wow. All right. How many pairs of sneakers do you own?
I don't know if I can even count. It's in the neighborhood of, I would say that I have currently in my house is in the neighborhood of 50.
Okay. It's not too bad.
It's not great. It's not great. Like one of our investors at Endstate is in the thousands.
Wow. I mean, that's a whole nother, just for the traditional sneakers, that's a whole other secondary, right? So if you're half as effective, and you should be more effective, right? But even if you're half as effective as that whole secondary game, I mean, the sky's the limit, right, for Endstate?
Yeah. Yep.
And then do you see branching off, you said kind of hoodies and shirts, that may not be as appropriate, but you could see golf balls, footballs, soccer balls, maybe types of hats, glasses, different. I mean, there really could be, for what Endstate's doing with sneakers, really could be across almost any product or anything that you touch, correct?
Yeah, we actually do have an apparel collaboration that's slated for early 2023.
Wow. It's crazy. So from a company perspective, really exciting. If I were coming out of college or experiencing the space, I'd love to work there. Do you have any openings now?
Yeah, we're hiring a full stack engineer. We're hiring a marketing manager as well. So still growing. As you mentioned, we raised money at the right time. As you all know, timing is just about as important as any other skill you can have in business. And of course, it's mostly luck. But we did raise at a great time. So we're in a good cash position despite all of the messiness that's happening in the broader crypto market. So we're hiring and growing aggressively. And like I said, we've got a really exciting collaboration pipeline for 2023.
Wow, awesome. And then you guys have a physical office?
Yep, we have a physical office in Boston, but some of our employees and contractors are also remote, so we're a hybrid team.
Gotcha. So no metaverse office yet?
It's in the works, actually. So we do have a metaverse environment that we're building, but no, we're not plugging in and putting on goggles every day quite yet.
Wow. So if I'm looking to work there as you continue to scale and go and grow, what's special about the culture, would you say?
Everyone at the company has an entrepreneur mindset, which I love, right? Everyone takes ownership of outcomes. They are ambitious. They take initiative to, figure things out and don't wait and sit on their hands. We just have such a great culture. And then of course the things that everyone says, mutual respect, a lot of really high trust relationships. Like I feel like people give lip service to that, but that's really true in Endstate. We really are a very effective and close team, and there's a high degree of trust. So it's just a blast to go to work every day and get to work with so many talented people. Like on the design side, some of the stuff they put out is just so mind blowing. Like I can't fathom how they like put pen to paper and come up with a new sneaker design from scratch. It's super cool for me to watch. But across the board, from our engineers to our business development to the design team, just a really strong, exciting team.
Very cool. And maybe switching gears here away from Endstate. So what's your take on the FTX founder? I guess they call him SBF.
Yeah, honestly, it's incredibly disappointing. I mean, he was positioning himself as the adult in the room in crypto, and I am, going to be the regulated exchange, and I'm going to professionalize this space. And he ended up being the biggest scammer of them all, right? I mean, some of the stuff that's coming out, and obviously it's all still alleged. The best case scenario is that he was massively incompetent, right? When he was positioning himself as very competent and super sophisticated and trustworthy. At best, he was incompetent, and at worst, it was, fraudulent and criminal. So it's just a mess of a situation. It makes everyone's job in the industry a whole lot harder to, scratch and claw for every ounce of legitimacy for each high profile scam and blow up. It just makes people that much more skeptical. Luckily for us, we provide a real actual physical product that can wrap their heads around, and the crypto component of it, or the blockchain component of it, is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle. So we're a little bit insulated from it, but it definitely makes everyone's jobs more difficult.
Yeah, I guess especially since it's such a new area or field. So would an old school analogy be just because one bank happened to take your money and run doesn't mean that all the other banks are bad?
Yeah, the bank analogy is tough because so many people think of crypto as just purely financial when there's a lot more to the blockchain ecosystem as a whole. But yeah, I mean that's an apt analogy where just because one player or many players in the space were irresponsible or were bad actors doesn't mean that everyone in the space is. And there's still so much more volume of legitimate great work happening in the space. It just doesn't get the headlines.
Oh, crazy. So how do you see blockchain and crypto kind of evolving? So look, 5-10 years down the road.
I think the crypto and blockchain will have made it when people stop talking about it, right? When it kind of like fades into the background as a technology that enables these better experiences, right? So Bitcoin is a store of value, and it allows you to send money across the world instantaneously for very low fees, right? So you don't have to wait for ACH clearing. You don't have to initiate a wire. There's no borders. It just moves at the speed of the internet. And when that goes into the background and people don't have to learn totally new behaviors, they'll have to learn some new behaviors, but when it's more seamless, I think that will be a success. Similar with NFTs, right? NFTs, the technology, it's essentially an empty data payload, right? Think of it like a PDF. It's almost like a file format, right? So people saying like, I hate NFTs, or, kind of saying like, oh, I hate PDFs. They don't really hate NFTs. They hate a specific use case or specific set of content that has been embodied in NFTs. But the technology of having a cryptographically verifiable digital asset that is provably scarce is a huge innovation from, things like having, everyone always gives the example of liens or real estate leases, on the blockchain, and being able to transact through smart contracts. For example, parametric insurance. This is one I always give in my class, right? So you have a smart contract that says, if my flight is delayed by more than 2 hours, automatically pay out my policy, right? So like all of that happens through a contract. There's no intermediary. There's no filing a claim. This smart contract looks at the global database of flights. The second my flight is more than 2 hours delayed, my policy pays out. And all of that happens seamlessly, right? So there's a lot of efficiencies that can happen that will facilitate better product experiences, and people may not even necessarily know what's happening in the background. That's what I think the bull case for the industry is.
Gotcha. And then what do you say to people that say, oh, Bitcoin's just for drug dealers and smugglers that want to kind of hide their transactions?
I'd say Bitcoin is a really bad way to do that. I think it was a good way to do it for about, maybe 3 or 4 years in like the early to mid 2010s. But there's been so many cases of high profile criminals, including the Silk Road, which was this, open marketplace for any asset that was using Bitcoin because they thought it was censorship resistant and completely anonymous. They found out the hard way that it was pseudonymous, and there's sort of forensics you can do on Bitcoin transactions to trace it to real people. So there are other cryptocurrencies that could be a better facilitator of illicit activity, but Bitcoin is a really bad one because the on-chain analytics are so good at this point. The other thing I'd say is that the US dollar itself facilitates a lot of illicit activity, and people aren't saying the US dollar is a bad thing or a fundamentally for criminals, even though I don't know, you read stats that like something like 40% of US dollars can have trace amounts of cocaine on them or something, right? Like all this crazy stuff that happens that people don't blame the US dollar for. It's the criminal activity. I think the same argument applies to Bitcoin, right? It's whatever you make of it, most people are not using it for criminal activity.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin really could be, by definition, it's a true global currency.
Yeah, that's right. It's completely borderless.
So would you ever envision where every country gets rid of their own currency and then Bitcoin is the one global currency?
I don't think every country would, because there's so much geopolitics involved in having your own currency and the relative strength of your own currency. But it's possible that every country will issue their own cryptocurrency, like a digital dollar or digital yuan, which we're already seeing. I also think that smaller countries who sort of don't benefit from having their own currency may adopt it as their currency, because it is sort of less. They're not empowering any one nation state by having it as their reserve currency, as opposed to being US dollar denominated or trying to prop up their own currency has all of these other implications associated with it. We're already seeing a few countries like El Salvador accept it as legal tender. I think in the future we'll see more countries do the same, especially for smaller economies who aren't really players on the global stage of people aren't transacting in their currencies for international deals. I think it could become a backbone of the international financial system.
Wow, amazing. So if I were a Wall Street analyst in charge of making money for my clients, so say I work at Fidelity and I run the blockchain and crypto practice, for lack of better words, and I called you and I said, hey, Bennett, I'm kind of in this space and trying to make people money, kind of where are the opportunities to make money and what are the ones to avoid?
Yeah, I'm not the right guy to ask about that. I don't, I'm not a crypto investor, right? I just sort of use the technology now on two businesses that I've started, but I've probably made embarrassingly little amount of money on crypto investments as someone who's so involved in the space. So I'm not the right guy to ask there.
Well, obviously buying the your sneakers or any sneakers that Endstate comes out with, that would be one way, right?
Right. Yeah, of course.
Do you have a subscription service where any sneaker that comes, it's almost like the wine, right? Where they've got Silver Oak or whatever has or Ferraris, right? They have a very, very limited. You have to be on the exclusive list. Do you ever see you coming up with some exclusive list where, hey, every new sneaker that comes out, you got right a first refusal?
Yeah, we actually, so our first ever sneaker drop that we did last year, the people who bought that and own the NFT have the right to buy into each subsequent drop. So that was one of the perks of buying into the first sneaker drop. And it's all mediated through the NFT, right? So how do we know who's on the list to buy? Prove you on the NFT, and then you can buy into the subsequent drop.
Wow. And has there already been, if you can comment, kind of, I'll say resales where there's been kind of proven, markup and profit?
Yeah. So our first drop, there's a pretty significant resale market, and the floor price for the first drop is over $1,000. So, the sort of the cheapest NFT that's for sale on secondary is over $1,000. One of the big pieces that's missing is something that accounts for the physical component, right? So there's a ton of NFT marketplaces and secondary marketplaces for NFTs, but not necessarily something that accounts for the physical product. So we see that as something that needs to be solved before there can be significant secondary transaction volume for Endstate sneakers.
Gotcha. Amazing. So what about any kind of fond memories or stories or something that we may not realize about kind of your crypto and blockchain journey?
I don't know if it's a fond memory, but it was something that was really formative. So when we were negotiating the deal for Cognate to be acquired by GoDaddy, flew back from GoDaddy HQ in San Francisco. I went to play basketball on a Saturday morning at Titus Sparrow Park in the South End in Boston, and I got my legs taken out from under me and I shattered my elbow. And so I had to have emergency surgery, and then first one didn't go great. I had to have another emergency surgery like a week and a half later, and all the while I was trying to negotiate this acquisition between Cognate and GoDaddy, and it was a really, really interesting experience. But it was also just sort of in the middle of like this first crypto bull run when there was this huge consciousness around, what was happening in the space. And even though that particular incident obviously is not a fond memory, it was just such a really interesting time where so many things happened in rapid succession that it always stands out in my mind as a formative part of my story and, sort of my journey in the blockchain and crypto space.
Wow. Amazing. Was Blake Irving the CEO then?
No. So it was Blake had left, I think maybe like a year prior to when we were acquired.
Wow. Interesting. Very cool. All right. So going to be wrapping up. So if there's any questions or comments, definitely fascinating. Please type them in. So maybe for yourself, assume you've had some mentors over your career, correct?
That's right.
What type of advice have you received?
In the startup world, done is better than perfect is the biggest piece of advice that sticks with me to this day. Obviously, there's a lot of judgment calls that you have to make around what product areas that applies to. When done is better than perfect, doesn't apply 100% of cases, but most of the time, it's really, really helpful and good advice. I, as a perfectionist, really struggled with that for my first business and shipping things that weren't quite ready or weren't as good as they could be. At some point, you just got to let go and move fast enough, and you don't have the luxury of getting things to be perfect. So that's the big one that it always sticks with me.
Well, what about any advice? You're still kind of on the young side, at least compared to me, but kind of what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Aside from don't go play basketball that Saturday morning, you mean? I think getting comfortable with failure is such a big component of being successful in business, startups in particular, and not being afraid of what other people think, or no one really cares what no one cares what you're doing, or cares about your failures or successes, which once you realize is kind of liberating, right? Like, okay, I can have this product launch, it doesn't go the way I want it to, people might like leave a couple comments and then they forget about it for the rest of their life. Being comfortable with that, and taking negative feedback and taking your lumps and having people saying this is dumb or I don't get it, being able to shrug that off, like the sooner you can really immunize yourself from those comments and those feelings, the better you're going to be.
Wow. Awesome. Very, very, very cool. So it's been awesome having you. Really appreciate it and definitely look forward to following along. And after we hang up here, I'm going to ask you a couple other questions of interest. And what else do we have? So Tucker, thanks for your help behind the scenes. We also have Tucker, I don't know if you can post or not, but for anybody that's watching, we just realized a week or so ago that it helps us to have 5-star ratings. So if you go on Apple Podcast and type in Tech Sales Insight, you'll see the podcasts that come up. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, you can give a review and hit 5-star. And Tucker, hopefully I explained that properly. And in the past week, I looked this morning, I think we're up to 81 5-star reviews. So that's good. But Bennett, definitely awesome, definitely fascinating in terms of what you have going on with Endstate. So this whole NFT sneaker thing, go check out Endstate, get in touch with Bennett, and wish you the best in your growing family, most importantly. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Randy. It was fun.